The summer heat of 1882 bore down on Butte, Montana like a hammer on an anvil, and Rebecca Lawson wondered if this was the day she would finally collapse in the dust and never rise again. Her knees ached from kneeling on the hard wooden planks outside the Red Star Saloon. Her throat was parched beyond measure, and her outstretched hand trembled with the effort of holding it up for yet another hour. The coins in her tin cup barely amounted to enough for a single meal, and she had been out here since dawn. Her dress, once a respectable calico pattern in shades of blue, now hung from her thin frame in tatters, stained with the grime of too many nights sleeping behind buildings or under wagons. Her auburn hair, which had once been her pride, fell in lank strands around a face that hunger had made gaunt and pale despite the relentless sun. She was 20 years old, though she felt ancient. Just 6 months ago, she had been living in Denver with her father, working as a seamstress and dreaming of opening her own dress shop one day. Then the fever took her father in a matter of days, and the landlord had wasted no time throwing her out when she could not pay the rent. She had heard there was work in the mining town of Butte, that women could find employment cooking or cleaning for the miners who flooded the area, seeking copper and silver. But when she arrived after weeks of grueling travel, thin and exhausted and with no references, every door had closed in her face. "Please," she said hoarsely to a well-dressed man who stepped out of the saloon, cigar smoke trailing behind him. "Just a few cents for food, sir." "I have not eaten in 2 days." The man looked down at her with distaste, stepped carefully around her as if she were something foul, and continued down the street without a word. Rebecca fought back tears. She had cried so much in recent weeks that she thought she had no tears left, but they kept coming anyway, hot and bitter. The afternoon sun climbed higher, and the street grew busier. Cowboys rode in from nearby ranches. Miners fresh from their shifts stumbled toward the saloon seeking whiskey and entertainment. Merchants conducted their business up and down the dusty Main Street. Most ignored her completely. Some tossed pennies into her cup without looking at her face. A few muttered words of disgust or speculation about what she must have done to end up in such a state. She was about to give up for the day, to take her meager earnings and try to find somewhere safe to sleep, when she heard the sound of boots stopping directly in front of her. She looked up slowly, expecting another rejection, another turned back. Instead, she found herself looking into the kindest pair of gray eyes she had ever seen. The man was tall and lean, with broad shoulders that spoke of hard work and a life spent outdoors. He wore dusty work clothes, a worn leather vest, and a hat that had seen better days. His face was tanned and weathered, with lines around his eyes that suggested he was somewhere in his mid-20s. Dark brown hair curled slightly at his collar, and a few days' worth of stubble shadowed his jaw. But it was his eyes that held her attention, gray as storm clouds but warm with an expression she had not seen directed at her in far too long, genuine concern. "Miss," he said, and his voice was deep and gentle, "how long have you been out here?" Rebecca swallowed hard, her voice coming out as barely more than a whisper. "All day, sir, but I have been in Butte for 3 weeks now." He crouched down so that he was at eye level with her, and she could see the compassion in his face more clearly now. "When did you last have a proper meal?" She tried to remember. "Tuesday, I think. A woman at the boarding house gave me her leftover breakfast, but that was." She lost track of the days sometimes. "I am not certain." The man's jaw tightened and she saw something flash in his eyes, anger perhaps, but not directed at her. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of coins, more money than she had seen in weeks, and pressed them into her palm. His hand was warm and calloused, the hand of a working man, and the touch was so gentle that she felt tears spring to her eyes again. "That is very kind," she managed to say. "Thank you, sir. God bless you." But he did not stand up and walk away as she expected. Instead, he looked at her intently for a long moment as if making a decision. Then he stood and held out his hand to her. "Come with me." Rebecca stared at his outstretched hand, confusion and fear warring in her chest. "Sir, I do not understand." "You need food and a safe place to sleep," he said matter-of-factly. "And you are not going to find either one sitting here in the dirt. My name is Nathan Lawson. I work at the Silver Creek Ranch about 5 miles outside of town. The owner's wife is a good woman, and she is always looking for help around the house. If you are willing to work, I can get you a real job and a clean place to stay." Rebecca's mind reeled. It sounded too good to be true, and she had learned the hard way that when something sounded too good to be true, it usually was. "I do not know you," she said cautiously. "Why would you help me?" Nathan's expression softened. "Because someone should have helped you long before now. Because leaving you here is not right. Because—" He paused, searching for words. "Because I believe people deserve a chance to get back on their feet when life knocks them down. So, what do you say? Will you trust me?" There was something in his face, in his steady gaze and sincere tone, that made Rebecca want to believe him. And truly, what choice did she have? Another night on the street might be the one that finally broke her. Slowly, her hands shaking, she reached up and placed her palm in his. His fingers closed around hers, strong and sure, and he helped her to her feet. Her legs nearly gave out after hours of kneeling, but Nathan caught her elbow and steadied her. "Easy now," he said. "When did you last have water?" "This morning. From the horse trough." He made a sound of dismay and immediately guided her toward the general store across the street. "First thing, we get you some water and food. Then we will head out to the ranch." Inside the store, Nathan purchased a canteen of fresh water, a loaf of bread, cheese, and dried apples. He took her to sit on the bench outside and watched carefully as she drank and ate, cautioning her to go slowly so she would not make herself sick. The water was cool and clean, the best thing she had tasted in weeks, and the food, simple as it was, seemed like a feast. "Not too fast," Nathan warned gently when she tried to gulp down the bread. "I know you are hungry, but your stomach needs time to adjust." Rebecca forced herself to slow down, taking small bites and sips as he instructed. As she ate, she studied him more carefully. He had a strong, honest face, not handsome in a refined way but attractive in the rugged manner of men who lived close to the land. There was a scar above his left eyebrow, probably from some ranch accident, and his hands bore the marks of hard labor. But his eyes remained kind, patient as he waited for her to finish eating. "Why do you have the same last name as me?" she asked suddenly, the thought occurring to her as the food revived her somewhat. Nathan looked surprised. "Lawson. It is not an uncommon name, I suppose. What is your first name?" "Rebecca. Rebecca Lawson." He smiled slightly, and she noticed that it transformed his face, making him look younger and less careworn. "Well, Miss Rebecca Lawson, it is a pleasure to make your acquaintance, and it is quite a coincidence about the names. Where are you from originally?" she asked, curious now. "Kansas. Little town called Abilene. My father was a farmer, but I wanted something different, so I came out to Montana Territory 5 years ago. Worked on a few different ranches before settling at Silver Creek. It is a good place, good people. I think you will like it there." "I am from Denver," Rebecca said quietly. "Or I was, until my father died and I lost everything." Nathan's expression grew sympathetic. "I am sorry for your loss. Both of my parents passed some years back. I know how hard it is to be alone in the world." They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes while Rebecca finished eating. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange. The heat of the day was finally starting to break, and a slight breeze stirred the dust in the street. "Are you ready to ride?" Nathan asked when she had drunk the last of the water. "It is about an hour to the ranch." Rebecca looked down at herself, suddenly self-conscious. "I must look terrible. I do not want to embarrass you." "You look like someone who has been through a hard time," Nathan said honestly. "But once we get you to the ranch, Mrs. Patterson will get you cleaned up and into some proper clothes. She is good that way. Come on." He led her down the street to where a sturdy bay horse was tied to a hitching post. The animal turned its head to look at them with large, gentle eyes. Nathan untied the reins and then turned to Rebecca. "Have you ridden before?" "A few times, but it has been years." "That is all right. You can ride with me. Just put your foot in the stirrup there and I will help you up." With his assistance, Rebecca managed to climb onto the horse's back, settling into the saddle. Nathan swung up easily behind her, his arms coming around her to hold the reins. She stiffened at first, unused to being so close to another person, but his touch was completely respectful and she gradually relaxed against him. "Comfortable enough?" he asked, his voice near her ear. "Yes, thank you." "Good, let us get you home." He clicked his tongue and urged the horse forward, and they began the journey out of Butte. As they left the town behind, Rebecca marveled at the landscape around them. She had been so focused on survival since arriving in Montana that she had barely noticed the wild beauty of the place. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow even in summer. Rolling grasslands stretched out on either side of the road, dotted with sagebrush and wildflowers. The sky was vast and endless, so different from the narrow streets of Denver she had known. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "It is," Nathan agreed. "Hard country, but beautiful. The winters are brutal, but the summers make up for it. You can see for miles out here. Makes a person feel small, but in a good way, you know. Like your problems are not as big as they seem when you are surrounded by all this." Rebecca thought about that. Her problems had seemed insurmountable these past weeks, crushing in their weight. But here, with the mountains rising around them and the wide sky overhead, she felt something shift inside her. Not hope exactly, not yet, but perhaps the possibility of hope. They rode in silence for a while, the rhythmic sound of the horses' hooves soothing. Rebecca found herself growing drowsy, exhaustion finally catching up with her now that she had food in her stomach and felt relatively safe. Her head started to nod forward, and she jerked it back up. "Go ahead and rest if you need to," Nathan said. "I have got you. You will not fall." She wanted to protest, to maintain some semblance of propriety, but she was so tired. Gradually, she let herself lean back against his chest, and his arms shifted slightly to support her more securely. She could feel the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his body, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt safe. The next thing she knew, Nathan was saying her name gently, and she opened her eyes to find that the sun had set, and they were approaching a cluster of buildings lit by lanterns. A large ranch house stood at the center, with a barn, bunkhouse, and several smaller structures surrounding it. Horses moved in a nearby corral and she could hear cattle lowing in the distance. "We are here," Nathan said. "Can you stand?" Rebecca nodded, though she felt stiff and sore. Nathan dismounted first and then helped her down, his hands steady on her waist. Her legs wobbled, and he kept a supporting arm around her as he led her toward the ranch house. The door opened before they reached it, and a woman appeared in the rectangle of warm light. She was in her 40s, Rebecca guessed, with dark hair streaked with gray and a round, pleasant face. She wore a simple dress and an apron, and her eyes widened when she saw Rebecca's condition. "Nathan, what have you brought us?" she asked, but her tone was not unkind. "This is Miss Rebecca Lawson, Mrs. Patterson. I found her in town. She has had a hard time of it and needs work. I thought perhaps you might have something for her." Mrs. Patterson took in Rebecca's appearance with a practiced eye, and Rebecca saw sympathy bloom on her face. "Of course. Bring her in, bring her in. Good heavens, child, you look ready to drop. Come inside." The interior of the ranch house was warm and welcoming, with comfortable furniture and the smell of cooking food hanging in the air. Mrs. Patterson immediately ushered Rebecca toward a chair at the large kitchen table. "Sit, sit. Nathan, go tell Mr. Patterson we have a guest and then get yourself washed up for supper. I will take care of Miss Lawson here." Nathan hesitated, looking at Rebecca with concern. "Will you be all right?" Rebecca managed a small smile. "Yes, thank you, Mr. Lawson, for everything." He nodded and touched the brim of his hat before heading back outside. Mrs. Patterson watched him go with an expression Rebecca could not quite read, then turned her attention back to her new guest. "Let me look at you properly," she said, pulling a chair close to Rebecca's. "When did you last eat?" "Mr. Lawson bought me food in town just before we left. Before that, it had been some days." Mrs. Patterson made a tusking sound. "And where have you been staying?" "Wherever I could find shelter. Behind buildings, under wagons." The older woman's eyes filled with tears. "You poor thing." "Well, you are safe now. We will get you cleaned up, fed properly, and into a real bed tonight. In the morning, we can talk about work. I do need help around here. The ranch is growing, and I cannot keep up with all the cooking and cleaning by myself anymore. Can you cook?" "Yes, madam." "And sew, clean, tend a garden, anything you need." "Good. That is very good. Come on, then. Let us get you to the washroom." Mrs. Patterson led her to a room off the kitchen where there was a large metal tub. She heated water on the stove and filled it, then provided Rebecca with soap, clean towels, and a nightgown. "Take your time. Clean yourself up properly. I will have food waiting when you are done." Left alone, Rebecca stripped off her filthy dress and sank into the warm water with a sigh of pure relief. She scrubbed her skin until it was pink and clean, washed her hair twice to remove all the dirt and grime, and finally emerged feeling more human than she had in weeks. The nightgown Mrs. Patterson had provided was soft and clean, and Rebecca put it on gratefully. When she returned to the kitchen, she found a plate of hot stew, fresh bread, and milk waiting for her. Mrs. Patterson sat with her while she ate, chatting about the ranch and the work that would need doing. Mr. Patterson, she explained, owned one of the more successful cattle ranches in the area. They employed about a dozen men, including cowboys, ranch hands, and workers who helped with various tasks. Nathan was one of their best cowboys, skilled with horses and cattle, reliable and hardworking. "He is a good man," Mrs. Patterson said. "Quiet, keeps to himself mostly, but always willing to help when someone needs it. He has been with us for 3 years now. My husband thinks highly of him." Rebecca thought about Nathan's kindness, the way he had looked at her with compassion instead of judgment. "He saved my life today," she said quietly. "I do not know how much longer I could have survived on the streets." Mrs. Patterson reached over and patted her hand. "Well, you are here now, and we will take care of you. Lord knows I could use another woman around this place. It gets lonely being the only female among all these men." After she finished eating, Mrs. Patterson showed her to a small but comfortable room on the second floor. It had a real bed with clean sheets, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the darkened prairie. Rebecca could hardly believe this was real, that she was here in this safe, clean place instead of huddled behind some building trying to stay warm. "Sleep as late as you need tomorrow," Mrs. Patterson instructed. "Your body needs rest. We will talk more about your duties when you are feeling stronger." Left alone, Rebecca climbed into the bed and pulled the blankets up around her. The sheets smelled of soap and sunshine, and the mattress was soft beneath her aching body. She thought she would lie awake for hours, still adjusting to this sudden change in her fortunes. But instead, she fell asleep almost immediately, dropping into a deep, dreamless slumber. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through the window and she could hear activity downstairs. She had no idea what time it was, only that she felt more rested than she had in months. There was a wash basin with fresh water on the dresser and draped over a chair. She found a simple work dress in a dark blue cotton, along with undergarments, stockings, and a pair of sturdy boots. Mrs. Patterson must have brought them while she slept. Rebecca washed and dressed quickly, braiding her clean hair and pinning it up. The dress fit reasonably well, though it was a bit loose. She would need to take it in, but that was work she could do easily. The boots were perhaps half a size too large, but with thick socks they would do fine. She made her way downstairs and found Mrs. Patterson in the kitchen, already hard at work preparing what looked like the midday meal. The older woman looked up with a smile. "There you are. I was beginning to wonder if you would sleep all day. Not that I would blame you. How are you feeling?" "Much better, thank you. I apologize for sleeping so late. I should have been up to help with breakfast." Mrs. Patterson waved a hand dismissively. "Nonsense. You needed the rest. But if you are feeling up to it, you can help me with dinner. The men will be coming in hungry at noon." Rebecca immediately set to work, falling into an easy rhythm with Mrs. Patterson as they prepared a large meal of roast beef, potatoes, vegetables, and biscuits. It felt good to be useful again, to have a purpose and a task. As they worked, Mrs. Patterson explained more about the ranch operations and what Rebecca's duties would be. "Mostly cooking and cleaning," she said. "The men eat 3 big meals a day and always want coffee available. There is laundry to do, mending, keeping the house tidy. In the fall, we do a lot of canning and preserving for winter. It is hard work, but honest work, and you will be treated fairly." "What about wages?" Rebecca asked hesitantly. "Room and board plus $15 a month. We pay on the first of each month. Does that suit you?" Rebecca nearly cried with relief. $15 a month was more than she had hoped for, enough to start saving again toward her dream of a dress shop. "Yes, madam. That suits me very well, thank you." At noon, the ranch hands began filing into the dining room, a large space off the kitchen with 2 long tables. Rebecca helped Mrs. Patterson carry out the food, feeling self-conscious as the men stared at her with undisguised curiosity. Most were polite enough, nodding greetings, but a few looked at her with the same calculating expressions she had gotten used to in town, trying to figure out what her story was. Then Nathan came in, and his face broke into a genuine smile when he saw her. He was cleaner than he had been yesterday, his hair damp as if he had dunked his head in the horse trough, and he had shaved the stubble from his jaw. He looked younger without it, and Rebecca found herself thinking that he was quite handsome in his own rough way. "Miss Lawson," he said, touching his hat. "You look much improved. Did you sleep well?" "Very well, thank you, and please call me Rebecca." "All right, Rebecca it is, and you should call me Nathan." They stood there for a moment, smiling at each other until one of the other cowboys called out, "Are we going to eat, or are you two going to stand there grinning all day?" Nathan shot the man a look but moved to take his seat. Rebecca hurried back to the kitchen, feeling her cheeks flush. Mrs. Patterson was watching her with an amused expression. "That boy has not looked at a woman like that in all the time he has been here," she commented. "I do not know what you mean," Rebecca said, though she did, hum. "Of course you do not." The afternoon passed quickly as Rebecca helped clean up from dinner, and then began learning the layout of the house and her various duties. Mrs. Patterson was a patient teacher, showing her where things were kept and how things were done. The work was hard but satisfying, and Rebecca found herself relaxing into it, grateful to have structure and purpose again. That evening, after supper had been served and cleaned up, Rebecca stepped out onto the front porch for a breath of air. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of pink and gold, and the air had that peculiar clarity that comes with high altitude. She stood there watching the light fade, thinking about how dramatically her life had changed in just 24 hours. She heard footsteps and turned to find Nathan approaching. He had his hat in his hands, turning it nervously. "Evening," he said. "Mrs. Patterson said I might find you out here. I wanted to check on you, see how your first day went." "It went well," Rebecca said. "Mrs. Patterson is very kind and the work is good. I cannot thank you enough for what you have done for me." Nathan shook his head. "You do not need to keep thanking me. I am just glad you are safe now. But I do need to thank you. You could have walked past me just like everyone else did, but you stopped. You helped me. You saw me as a person worth helping when most people looked right through me." He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the darkening landscape. "I know what it is like to have nothing," he said finally. "When I first came out here, I had about $5 to my name and no prospects. A rancher named Tom Williams gave me a chance when no one else would. He taught me everything about ranching, treated me fair, gave me a reason to keep going when I was ready to give up. He died 2 years ago, kicked by a horse, but I have never forgotten what he did for me. So when I saw you outside that saloon, I just thought maybe I could be for you what Tom was for me. Someone who gives a damn when no one else does." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. "Well, you succeeded. You quite literally saved my life." Nathan looked at her then, his gray eyes serious in the fading light. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What happened? How did you end up in Butte with nothing?" Rebecca took a breath and told him the story. About her father's death, losing their home, the journey to Montana in search of work, arriving with no money and no connections and finding every door closed against her. Nathan listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker as she spoke. "People can be cruel," he said when she finished. "They see someone down on their luck and they assume it is that person's fault somehow, that they must deserve it. But life is not like that. Sometimes terrible things happen to good people, and they need help getting back on their feet. I am sorry you had to go through all that alone." "I am not alone anymore," Rebecca said softly. They stood together in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge overhead. Rebecca realized with some surprise that she felt happy, truly happy, for the first time in months. She had a safe place to sleep, honest work, enough to eat, and someone who had shown her genuine kindness. It seemed like a miracle. "I should let you get some rest," Nathan said eventually. "Tomorrow is another long day, for you as well. What time do you start work?" "Before dawn, usually. We are moving cattle to new pasture this week, so it will be early mornings and late nights." "That sounds exhausting," he shrugged. "It is the life, but I like it. I like being outside, working with the animals, seeing the results of my labor. It is honest work, you know, makes a man feel useful." "I understand that. I felt useful today for the first time in a long while. It felt good." Nathan smiled at her, and she found herself smiling back. There was something so easy about being with him, so natural. She barely knew him, yet she felt more comfortable in his presence than she had with people she had known for years. "Well, good night then, Rebecca." "Good night, Nathan." He put his hat back on and headed toward the bunkhouse where the ranch hands slept. Rebecca watched him go, then went back inside to her small room. As she got ready for bed, she thought about Nathan's gray eyes and kind smile, and she found herself hoping she would see more of him in the days to come. The weeks that followed fell into a pleasant routine. Rebecca rose early each morning to help Mrs. Patterson prepare breakfast for the ranch hands. They worked side by side making biscuits, frying eggs and bacon, brewing large pots of strong coffee. The men would file in hungry and tired, eat quickly, and head back out to their work. Nathan always made a point of greeting Rebecca, sometimes lingering for an extra moment or two to exchange a few words before he had to leave. During the days, Rebecca kept busy with housework, cooking, laundry, and mending. Mrs. Patterson proved to be not just an employer but a friend, and the two women developed an easy camaraderie as they worked together. The older woman had a wealth of stories about the early days in Montana, about her courtship with Mr. Patterson, about the various men who had worked the ranch over the years. She spoke fondly of Nathan, confirming what Rebecca had already observed, that he was one of the good ones, reliable and honest and kind. The evenings were Rebecca's favorite time. After supper was served and the dishes were cleaned, she often found herself on the porch as the sun set, and more often than not, Nathan would appear to join her. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories from their pasts, discussing their dreams for the future, debating the merits of Montana versus Kansas versus Colorado. Nathan told her about his work with the cattle and horses, his love for the land, his hope to one day own a small ranch of his own. Rebecca shared her dream of opening a dress shop, her love of sewing and creating beautiful things, her desire to build a life of security and independence. "That is admirable," Nathan said one evening as they sat on the porch steps watching fireflies dance in the twilight. "A woman with her own business, that takes courage, or perhaps just stubbornness," Rebecca replied with a smile. "My father always said I was too stubborn for my own good." "I would say determined rather than stubborn. There is a difference." As the weeks turned into months, Rebecca realized that her feelings for Nathan were deepening into something more than simple gratitude or friendship. She found herself looking for him throughout the day, her heart lifting when she caught a glimpse of him working in the corral or riding in from the range. She began to notice small details about him. The way he was always gentle with the horses, how he never raised his voice even when frustrated, the quiet competence with which he approached every task. She noticed how the other men respected him, sought his advice, looked to him as a natural leader despite his young age, and she noticed how he looked at her with a warmth and affection that made her pulse quicken. One afternoon in late September, Rebecca was hanging laundry when she heard shouting from the direction of the corral. She dropped the sheet she was holding and hurried toward the sound, her heart pounding with worry. A crowd of ranch hands had gathered around the corral, and she could see a large black horse bucking and rearing inside, clearly in distress. Then she saw Nathan in there with the horse, speaking in low, calm tones, slowly approaching the panicked animal. "He is going to get himself killed," one of the men muttered. "That horse is wild. We should just shoot it and be done with it," another said, but Nathan paid no attention to the commentary. He kept moving slowly, steadily, never making any sudden movements, continuing to speak in that low, soothing voice. Rebecca watched with her heart in her throat as he gradually got close enough to touch the horse's neck. The animal flinched, but did not bolt. Nathan continued speaking, his hand moving in slow, gentle circles on the horse's sweating coat. Gradually, incredibly, the horse began to calm. Its breathing slowed, the wild look left its eyes, and it stood still, trembling but no longer panicking. Nathan continued to stroke its neck and speak softly, and after several long minutes, the horse lowered its head and nuzzled against him. The watching cowboys broke into applause, and Nathan finally looked up, seeming to remember he had an audience. He saw Rebecca standing there and smiled, that warm, genuine smile that made her insides flutter. Later, when the horse had been safely moved to a separate paddock and the excitement had died down, Rebecca found Nathan by the water pump washing the dust and sweat from his face and arms. "That was incredibly brave," she said, "and incredibly foolish." Nathan looked up, water dripping from his hair. Someone had to calm him down before he hurt himself. He was tangled in old barbed wire out in the pasture and the men had to cut him loose. He was terrified. "You could have been killed, but I was not." He dried his face with a cloth and turned to face her fully. "Rebecca, I have been around horses my whole life. I know what I am doing." That does not make it less frightening to watch. Something shifted in Nathan's expression. "You were frightened for me." Rebecca realized what she had revealed and felt her cheeks warm. "Of course I was. I would hate for anything to happen to you." Nathan took a step closer to her. They were standing in the shadow of the barn, hidden from view of the house. "Rebecca," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something." Her heart began to race. "What is it?" "These past months, getting to know you, spending time with you, it has been the best part of my day. Every day. You are not just someone I helped anymore. You are someone I care about deeply. Someone I think about constantly, someone I—" He paused, searching for words. "Someone I have come to love." Rebecca felt as if all the air had left her lungs. "Nathan, I know it might be too soon to say such things. I know you might not feel the same way. But when I was in that corral with that horse, all I could think was that if something went wrong, I would never have told you how I feel. And I could not bear that." He reached out tentatively and took her hand. "I love you, Rebecca. I think I have loved you since the moment I saw you outside that saloon and looked into your eyes." Rebecca felt tears spill down her cheeks, but they were tears of joy. "Nathan, I love you too. I have been afraid to admit it, even to myself, but it is true. You gave me back my life, but more than that, you gave me a reason to want to live it. You make me happy in a way I never thought I could be again." Nathan's face broke into a wide grin, and he pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. She went willingly, resting her head against his chest and feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the fading afternoon light. Finally, Nathan pulled back slightly to look down at her. "May I kiss you?" Instead of answering, Rebecca rose up on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, both of them learning this new aspect of their relationship. Then Nathan's arms tightened around her and the kiss deepened, becoming something more passionate, more certain. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I have wanted to do that for months," Nathan admitted. "I have wanted you to," Rebecca replied. They kissed again, and it felt like coming home, like finding something Rebecca had not even known she was searching for. When they finally drew apart, Nathan took both of her hands in his. "I want to court you properly," he said. "I want to do this right. Would you allow me that privilege?" "Yes," Rebecca said without hesitation. "Yes, I would like that very much." From that day forward, everyone at the ranch knew that Nathan and Rebecca were courting. Mrs. Patterson was delighted, declaring that she had known from the start that they were meant for each other. Mr. Patterson, a gruff but kind man whom Rebecca had come to know better over the months, gave Nathan his blessing with a handshake and a warning to treat Rebecca with the respect she deserved. The courtship was necessarily unconventional given their circumstances. They could not go to dances or socials, as Nathan worked long hours and they lived miles from town. But they found their own ways to spend time together. Nathan began taking his meals at the house with Rebecca and the Pattersons rather than in the bunkhouse with the other men. After supper, they would walk together in the evening air, sometimes talking, sometimes content just to be silent together. On Sundays, their one day of partial rest, they would ride out together on horseback to explore the surrounding countryside, packing a lunch and spending hours away from the ranch. On one such Sunday in early October, Nathan took Rebecca to a high meadow overlooking a small lake. The aspen trees were turning gold, their leaves shimmering in the breeze, and the water reflected the deep blue of the autumn sky. They spread a blanket and ate the lunch Rebecca had packed, then lay back to watch clouds drift overhead. "I could stay here forever," Rebecca said contentedly. Nathan rolled onto his side to look at her. "I have been thinking about the future," he said. "About us." Rebecca turned to meet his gaze. "What about us?" "I want to marry you, Rebecca. I know we have not been courting long by traditional standards, but I am certain of my feelings. You are the woman I want to spend my life with." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I have been carrying this around for 2 weeks, trying to find the right moment." Rebecca sat up, her heart pounding. Nathan opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring with a small blue stone. "It is not much," he said. "Just a garnet I found in a creek bed and had a jeweler in Butte set, but I wanted you to have something that came from this land, from Montana, where we found each other." "Nathan, it is beautiful," Rebecca whispered. "Rebecca Lawson, will you marry me? Will you be my wife?" "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, of course I will marry you." Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger and then pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply. They lay back on the blanket, holding each other close, and Rebecca thought about how strange and wonderful life could be. 6 months ago, she had been starving on the streets of Butte, certain she would die alone and forgotten. Now she was engaged to a man she loved more than she had thought possible, planning a future filled with hope and promise. "When should we marry?" she asked. "As soon as possible, as far as I am concerned, but I want you to have the wedding you want. I know women have ideas about these things." Rebecca thought about it. "I would like something simple. Just us, the Pattersons, and whoever else you want to invite, maybe at the ranch in the spring when everything is green and growing again." "Spring sounds perfect," Nathan agreed. "That gives me time to save more money to make sure I can provide for you properly." "Nathan, I have my own savings now. Between the two of us, we will be fine." He smiled and kissed her forehead. "Between the two of us, we can do anything." They spent the rest of the afternoon in that meadow, making plans and dreaming about their future. Nathan wanted to continue working at the ranch for another year or two, saving as much as possible. Then, with luck and hard work, he hoped to buy a small parcel of land where they could start their own ranch, something modest at first but with room to grow. Rebecca still dreamed of her dress shop, and Nathan encouraged her to pursue it, saying they could make both their dreams work together. As the sun began to set and they prepared to ride back to the ranch, Rebecca looked out over the landscape, the mountains in the distance, the lake shimmering below, and felt a surge of love for this hard, beautiful land that had become her home. Winter arrived early that year, with snow falling in mid-November and temperatures plunging well below freezing. The work at the ranch became harder, more focused on survival and maintaining the cattle through the brutal cold. Rebecca and Mrs. Patterson spent long hours cooking hearty meals to keep the men fed and strong, baking bread, making stews, ensuring there was always hot coffee available. The house had to be kept warm, which meant constantly feeding the stove, and laundry became more challenging as clothes took forever to dry in the cold, damp air. But despite the hardships, Rebecca had never been happier. She and Nathan were officially engaged, and the Pattersons had become like family to her. She had a home, work she enjoyed, money saved, and a future to look forward to. When she thought back to that desperate, hungry woman kneeling outside the saloon just 6 months earlier, It seemed like a different person, a different lifetime. Nathan continued to court her throughout the winter, finding small ways to show his love even when the weather made it difficult to spend much time outdoors. He brought her small gifts, a handful of dried wildflowers he had pressed between the pages of a book, a smooth river stone he thought was pretty, a ribbon for her hair he had bought on a rare trip to town. He helped her with the heavy work around the house when he had time, chopping extra firewood or hauling water. And every night before he returned to the bunkhouse, they would stand together on the porch for a few stolen moments, bundled in coats and scarves, sharing kisses and whispered words of love. Christmas was a warm, joyful affair. Mrs. Patterson cooked a feast, and all the ranch hands gathered in the house for the celebration. There was music and laughter, and Nathan gave Rebecca a beautiful shawl he had commissioned from a woman in town, deep green wool that brought out the color in her eyes. She gave him a shirt she had sewn herself, carefully measured and stitched with her best work. They stood together by the fire that evening, her hand in his, and Rebecca sent up a silent prayer of thanks for all the blessings that had come into her life. As winter slowly gave way to spring, plans for the wedding began in earnest. Mrs. Patterson threw herself into the preparations with enthusiasm, helping Rebecca sew a simple but lovely wedding dress of cream-colored cotton with delicate embroidery on the bodice. They planned a small ceremony on the ranch, followed by a celebration dinner for everyone who lived and worked there. The local preacher agreed to make the journey out from Butte to perform the ceremony. Nathan, meanwhile, was working longer hours than ever, determined to save every penny possible toward their future ranch. Rebecca sometimes worried that he was pushing himself too hard, but he always insisted he was fine, that every hour of work was an hour closer to their dream. One evening in late March, as Rebecca was preparing supper, Nathan came bursting into the kitchen with an expression of barely contained excitement. "Rebecca, you need to come with me right now." "Nathan, I am in the middle of cooking. What is going on? Please just come. Mrs. Patterson can watch the stove for a few minutes." Mrs. Patterson, who had been setting the table, waved Rebecca away. "Go on, child. I can manage here." Mystified, Rebecca followed Nathan outside. He led her to the barn, and there in one of the stalls, she saw a beautiful paint mare with a new foal standing on wobbly legs beside her. "She was born about an hour ago," Nathan said, his voice soft with wonder. Mr. Patterson said if the mare and foal both survive the next few days, the foal is ours, our first animal for our ranch. Rebecca felt tears spring to her eyes. "Nathan, really, really?" Mr. Patterson said it is an early wedding gift. The foal is ours to raise and keep. When we have our own place, we will take her with us. They stood together watching the foal, and Rebecca thought about what it meant. This little animal represented the beginning of their life together, the first tangible piece of their shared dream. She leaned against Nathan and he wrapped his arm around her. "What should we name her?" Rebecca asked. "What about Hope?" Nathan suggested. "Because that is what you gave me, hope for a better future." "Hope," Rebecca repeated, testing the name. "Yes, I like that. Hope it is." The foal survived and thrived, and Rebecca visited her every day, watching her grow stronger and more confident. Nathan began the gentle process of getting the foal accustomed to human touch and handling, preparing her for the day she would be old enough to train for riding. Finally, in late April when the grass was green and wildflowers dotted the meadows, Rebecca's wedding day arrived. It was a beautiful spring morning, warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of sagebrush and new growth. Rebecca dressed in her wedding gown with Mrs. Patterson's help, arranging her auburn hair in soft curls pinned up with small white flowers. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the healthy, happy woman looking back at her. She had gained weight over the winter, no longer gaunt and hollow-cheeked. Her skin glowed with health and her eyes sparkled with joy. "You look beautiful, my dear," Mrs. Patterson said, tears in her eyes. "Nathan is a lucky man." "I am the lucky one," Rebecca replied. "I cannot believe this is real sometimes, that I get to marry a man like Nathan, have a life like this." "You deserve every bit of happiness, Rebecca. You have worked hard and been brave and kind. Now go marry that boy before he wears a hole in the ground from pacing." The ceremony was held outside, near a stand of cottonwood trees that were just beginning to leaf out. Chairs had been set up for the guests, all the ranch hands cleaned up and in their Sunday best. Mr. Patterson walked Rebecca down the makeshift aisle, since she had no father of her own to do it, and she felt grateful for his steadying presence. Then she saw Nathan waiting at the end of the aisle, and everything else faded away. He wore a new suit, his hair neatly combed, his face clean-shaven and anxious. When he saw her, his expression transformed into one of such love and awe that Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. The ceremony itself was simple and traditional. They spoke their vows clearly and firmly, promising to love and honor each other, to stand together through whatever trials life might bring. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and invited Nathan to kiss his bride, Nathan cupped Rebecca's face gently in his hands and kissed her with such tenderness that everyone watching smiled. The celebration afterward was joyful and lively. Mrs. Patterson had outdone herself with the food, and someone produced a fiddle, and there was dancing and laughter until well after dark. Nathan and Rebecca danced together, awkward at first since neither was particularly skilled, but soon they found their rhythm and moved together easily, naturally, as if they had been partners their whole lives. As the evening wound down and the stars came out, Nathan took Rebecca's hand and led her away from the celebration to the small cabin that Mr. Patterson had given them to live in, a cozy 2-room structure about 100 yards from the main house. Inside, Mrs. Patterson had prepared everything beautifully, with fresh linens on the bed, wildflowers in a vase, and a fire burning in the small stove. Nathan closed the door behind them and turned to Rebecca. "Hello, Mrs. Lawson," he said with a grin. "Hello, Mr. Lawson," she replied, suddenly feeling shy despite everything. He crossed to her and took her hands. "Are you happy?" "Happier than I ever thought possible." "Good. That is all I want, Rebecca, to make you happy, to give you a good life, to love you the way you deserve to be loved." "You already do all of those things," she said softly. "You saved me, Nathan, not just that day in Butte, but every day since. You showed me that life could be good again, that I could trust and love and hope." "And you saved me right back," Nathan replied. "I was just going through the motions before I met you, working hard but without any real purpose beyond the next day's wages. You gave me something to work for, someone to build a future with. We saved each other." They came together then in a kiss that was both tender and passionate, the beginning of their wedding night and their life together as husband and wife. And Rebecca thought, as Nathan lifted her in his arms and carried her to their marriage bed, that all the suffering and fear she had endured had been worth it to bring her to this moment, to this man, to this life. The months that followed were among the happiest of Rebecca's life. She continued to help Mrs. Patterson with the household work, but now she had her own small home to manage as well. She delighted in making the cabin comfortable and inviting, sewing curtains for the windows, arranging their few possessions to make the space feel like home. Nathan would come in from long days of work to find a hot meal waiting and a wife who greeted him with genuine joy. They would eat together, talking about their days, making plans for the future, simply enjoying being together. In the evenings, they would often walk out to check on Hope, who was growing rapidly and showing signs of being an intelligent, spirited horse. Nathan was teaching Rebecca more about handling horses, and she found she enjoyed it more than she had expected. There was something satisfying about working with such large, powerful animals and earning their trust. Summer arrived hot and busy, with long days of work under the relentless sun. Rebecca helped with the enormous task of feeding the crew during haying season, preparing massive quantities of food for men who worked from dawn to dusk, bringing in the hay that would feed the cattle through the next winter. It was exhausting work, but she did not mind. She and Nathan were saving steadily toward their goal of their own ranch, and every dollar earned brought them closer to that dream. In late August, Rebecca began to suspect she might be pregnant. She missed her monthly courses and began to feel queasy in the mornings. She waited to be certain before telling Nathan, not wanting to get his hopes up if she was wrong. But after another month passed and there was no doubt, she decided to share the news. She chose an evening when Nathan came home earlier than usual, the work having wrapped up quickly. She had prepared his favorite meal and wore her best dress. When they sat down to eat, Nathan looked at her curiously. "What is the occasion?" he asked. "Did I forget something important?" "No," Rebecca said, suddenly nervous despite herself. "But I have something to tell you, something wonderful." Nathan set down his fork, giving her his full attention. "What is it?" "Nathan, I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." For a moment Nathan just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. He jumped up from his chair, pulled her to her feet, and spun her around with a whoop of joy. "We are having a baby." "Rebecca, truly, truly," she confirmed, laughing at his excitement. He set her down carefully as if she were made of glass, his hands on her shoulders. How are you feeling? Do you need anything? Should you be standing?" "Nathan, I am fine. The baby is not due until next spring, probably March or April, and I am perfectly capable of standing and working and everything I have been doing." But from that day forward, Nathan treated her as if she were infinitely precious and fragile. He insisted on helping with any heavy work, worried constantly about her overdoing it, and checked on her multiple times throughout the day. It was endearing even when it was a bit exasperating. The Pattersons were delighted by the news, and Mrs. Patterson immediately began planning and preparing for the baby's arrival. She helped Rebecca sew baby clothes and blankets, shared advice and wisdom from raising her own children years before, and promised to be there to help with the birth. As the year turned and winter arrived once again, Rebecca marveled at how much her life had changed. 2 years ago, she had been begging on the streets of Butte, starving and desperate. Now she was a married woman expecting her first child, living in a comfortable home with a husband who adored her, working toward dreams she had thought were lost forever. It seemed like a miracle, but it was simply the result of one man's kindness and both of their determination to build something good together. The winter was hard, as Montana winters always were, but Rebecca stayed warm and well-fed and relatively comfortable despite her growing belly. Nathan was even more attentive than usual, making sure she never had to go out in the cold, doing any outdoor work himself, constantly checking that she had everything she needed. In late February, as Rebecca's due date approached, a late winter storm rolled in, bringing heavy snow and high winds. It lasted for 3 days, keeping everyone housebound. When it finally cleared, the world was buried under several feet of fresh snow, and the temperature had dropped dangerously low. Nathan and the other men spent days digging out paths and checking on the cattle, making sure none had been lost in the storm. It was exhausting, dangerous work in the extreme cold. On the third day after the storm, Nathan came home later than usual, and Rebecca could see immediately that something was wrong. He was limping, and his face was pale beneath his tan. "Nathan, what happened?" she asked, hurrying over to him as fast as her pregnant bulk would allow. "It is nothing. Just turned my ankle in the snow. I am fine." But as he sat down to remove his boot, Rebecca saw him wince in pain. His ankle was badly swollen and already bruising. "This is not nothing," she said firmly. "You need to rest and ice this. I have to get back out there. The cattle. The other men can handle the cattle. You are going to rest that ankle before you cause permanent damage." They argued about it, but Rebecca was adamant, and eventually Nathan gave in. He spent the next several days mostly off his feet, chafing at the inactivity, but admitting his ankle felt much better with rest. It was during this forced convalescence that they had long, uninterrupted hours to talk about the future, to dream about their child, to plan in detail for the ranch they hoped to start. "I have been talking to Mr. Patterson," Nathan said one afternoon as they sat by the fire. "There is a parcel of land for sale about 10 miles from here. It is not large, only about 300 acres, but it has good water and decent grazing. The owner is getting old and wants to move closer to his daughter in Helena. Mr. Patterson thinks we could get it for a fair price." Rebecca felt excitement flutter in her chest. "Could we afford it? With what we have saved and what the bank might lend us, yes. It would be tight and we would have to build everything ourselves, but we could do it. We could have our own place, Rebecca." Finally. "I think we should do it," Rebecca said decisively. "I think it is time." They shook hands on it, sealing the decision, and Nathan's eyes were bright with excitement and determination. As soon as his ankle healed enough, he would ride out to see the property and begin negotiations. Their dream was finally within reach. But before they could move forward with those plans, Rebecca went into labor. It was mid-March, a week earlier than they had expected. She woke in the middle of the night with sharp pains in her back and knew immediately what was happening. "Nathan," she said, shaking him awake. "It is time. The baby is coming." Nathan jolted awake, instantly alert. "Now, are you certain?" "Yes, I am certain. You need to fetch Mrs. Patterson." Nathan pulled on his boots and coat and ran through the darkness to the main house. He returned quickly with Mrs. Patterson, who took charge of the situation with calm efficiency. She sent Nathan back out to heat water and then prepare himself to wait, as men did at times like these. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the rest of the night and into the next day. Rebecca had known it would be hard, but the reality was more intense than she had imagined. Mrs. Patterson stayed with her throughout, offering encouragement and support, helping her through each contraction. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, Rebecca gave birth to a healthy baby boy. "You have a son," Mrs. Patterson announced, placing the squalling infant in Rebecca's arms. "And he has got a fine set of lungs." Rebecca looked down at the tiny red face and felt a love so overwhelming it took her breath away. He was perfect, absolutely perfect, with a shock of dark hair and tiny, grasping fingers. Nathan was allowed in then, and Rebecca would never forget the expression on his face when he first saw his son. He approached slowly, almost reverently, and sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "Rebecca," he whispered, "you did it. He is beautiful." "He looks like you," Rebecca said with a tired smile. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names but never settled on one definitively. Nathan reached out with one finger to touch his son's tiny hand, and the baby immediately grasped it. "What about Thomas?" Nathan suggested softly. "After Tom Williams, the man who gave me my start out here. If it were not for him, I would not have been in Butte that day to meet you." Rebecca felt tears slide down her cheeks. "Thomas Lawson. I love it. Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the world, little one. The weeks after Thomas's birth passed in a blur of exhaustion and joy. Rebecca had never known it was possible to be so tired and so happy at the same time. Thomas was a good baby for the most part, but he demanded attention constantly, needing to be fed, changed, soothed, and held. Nathan was wonderful with him, gentle and patient, taking his turn walking the floor with Thomas when he was fussy so Rebecca could rest. As spring progressed and Rebecca recovered her strength, they moved forward with their plans to purchase the land Nathan had found. Mr. Patterson helped them negotiate a fair price, and in early May, they became the proud owners of 300 acres of Montana grassland with a creek running through it, and a view of the mountains that took Rebecca's breath away. "This is ours," Nathan said, standing with his arm around Rebecca as they surveyed their property for the first time. Thomas was strapped to Rebecca's chest in a sling she had sewn, sleeping peacefully against her. "This is where we will build our life, raise our son, make our dreams real." "It is perfect," Rebecca said. "Absolutely perfect." They continued living at the Patterson Ranch for the time being while Nathan worked on building a house and barn on their new land. It was slow going, as he could only work on it in whatever spare time he had, but gradually, the structures began to take shape. Other ranch hands helped when they could, and Mr. Patterson donated lumber and supplies at cost. By late summer, they had a small but solid house with 2 rooms, a barn that could shelter a few animals, and a corral, on a warm day in September, almost exactly 3 years after the day Nathan had found Rebecca outside the saloon in Butte. They moved into their new home. It was not much to look at yet, rough and unfinished in many ways, but it was theirs. They owned the land beneath their feet, the roof over their heads, their future. That first night in their own home, after Thomas was asleep in his cradle and the last box had been unpacked, Nathan and Rebecca stood on their front porch looking out at their land in the moonlight. "You ever think about that day in Butte?" Nathan asked. "When I first saw you." "Sometimes," Rebecca admitted. "It seems like a lifetime ago, like that was a different person." "In a way, I suppose it was. We were both different people then. Life had not been kind to either of us, but we found each other at exactly the right moment." Rebecca thought about that. "I used to wonder why God allowed such terrible things to happen to me. Losing my father, losing everything, ending up on the streets. It seemed so cruel and senseless. But now, I think maybe I had to go through all that to end up here with you. Maybe I would never have come to Montana otherwise. Maybe we would never have met." "I am glad we did meet," Nathan said simply. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Rebecca. You and Thomas both." They kissed in the moonlight, and Rebecca felt such profound contentment that it almost frightened her. She had learned that life could change in an instant, that happiness was not guaranteed. But she also knew that she and Nathan were strong together, that they had already overcome so much, and that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as they faced everything, side by side. The years that followed were full of hard work, but also rich with joy and satisfaction. Nathan and Rebecca slowly built up their ranch, starting with just a few cattle and gradually increasing the herd as they could afford it. Hope, their paint mare, proved to be an excellent horse, and they bred her to produce more foals. Rebecca started a vegetable garden and learned to preserve food for the long winters. She also, in what spare time she could find, began sewing again, making clothes not just for her family but taking in work from other ranch families in the area. It was not the dress shop she had once dreamed of, but it was satisfying work that brought in extra income. Thomas grew from a baby into a lively, curious toddler with his father's gray eyes and his mother's auburn hair. He was fearless and energetic, keeping Rebecca constantly on her toes. Nathan doted on him, teaching him about horses and cattle, carrying him on his shoulders as he worked, pointing out hawks circling overhead and explaining the names of different plants. When Thomas was 2 years old, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect, and in the spring of 1886, she gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah. She was a calmer baby than Thomas had been, content to observe the world with serious blue eyes. Thomas was initially skeptical of this new addition to the family, but soon became fiercely protective of his little sister. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Nathan's skill with animals became known in the region, and people began bringing him horses to train. It became a secondary source of income that helped them through the lean times. Rebecca's sewing business also expanded, and she found herself making wedding dresses, Sunday best clothes, and even riding skirts for the women who were beginning to take up horseback, riding as a hobby rather than just a necessity. By 1890, 8 years after that fateful day in Butte, the Lawson Ranch was well established and respected in the community. They had a small but healthy herd of cattle, several fine horses, a thriving garden, and 2 wonderful children. The house had been expanded to include 3 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, and even a small parlor. It was not grand by any means, but it was comfortable and filled with love. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching Thomas and Sarah play in the yard, Nathan turned to Rebecca. "Do you remember what you told me you wanted back when we were courting, about opening a dress shop?" "Of course I remember," Rebecca said, "but life took us in a different direction, and I am happy with how things turned out. What if you did not have to choose? What if you could have both?" Rebecca looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" "Butte is growing," Nathan explained. "They are building new businesses all the time. I was in town last week and saw a small building for lease on a good street. It is not large, but it would be big enough for a dress shop. You could rent it, set up your business there. I could bring you in a few days a week to work, and Mrs. Patterson has said she would love to watch the children." Rebecca felt a flutter of excitement mixed with apprehension. "Nathan, that would cost money we might need for the ranch." "The ranch is doing well. We can afford it. And Rebecca, you are so talented. People are always commenting on your work. You could make a real success of this. Plus, it would give you something that is yours, separate from the ranch and the family. I think you deserve that." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. After all these years, Nathan still thought about her dreams, still wanted to help her achieve them. "Are you certain we can afford it?" "I am certain. Let us at least go look at the building. If it feels right, we will take it. If not, we will wait until something better comes along." They went to Butte the following week, leaving the children with the Pattersons. Walking through the streets of the town where they had first met, Rebecca thought about how much had changed. The town had grown considerably, with new buildings lining the streets and a general air of prosperity. The building Nathan had found was on a corner, with large windows that would be perfect for displaying finished dresses. It was small but clean and well-maintained, with a back room that could serve as a workspace. "What do you think?" Nathan asked as they stood inside the empty space. Rebecca could see it so clearly in her mind. Bolts of fabric lining one wall, a counter for conducting business, a mirror where customers could see themselves in their new dresses, her sewing machine in the back room. It was perfect. "I think yes," she said. "I think I want to do this." They signed the lease that same day, and Rebecca threw herself into preparing the shop. Nathan built shelves and a counter. She ordered fabric and supplies. Mrs. Patterson spread the word among her friends and acquaintances. 2 months later, Lawson's dress shop opened for business. and Rebecca found herself living yet another dream she had thought was lost forever. She worked at the shop 2 days a week, sometimes 3 if she had large orders to fill. Nathan would drive her in early in the morning and return to pick her up in the evening. The children would stay with Mrs. Patterson, who loved having them. The business grew steadily, as Rebecca's skill and fair prices earned her a loyal clientele. She hired a young woman to help with the simpler sewing tasks, giving employment to someone who needed it just as she had once needed it. The shop also gave her a connection to the town and the people there that she would not have had otherwise. She heard news and gossip, made friends with other businesswomen, became part of the community in a new way. She loved the ranch and her life there, but she also loved having this separate space that was entirely hers, where she could exercise her creativity and business skills. On the 10-year anniversary of the day they met, Nathan suggested they have dinner at the restaurant that now stood where the Red Star Saloon had once been. The saloon had burned down years earlier and been replaced by a more respectable establishment. They hired a young woman from a neighboring ranch to watch the children for the evening, dressed in their finest clothes, and rode into town. Over dinner, Rebecca looked across the table at her husband and marveled at the life they had built together. Nathan had some gray threading through his dark hair now, and the lines around his eyes were deeper, carved there by years of sun and wind and hard work. But he was still the same man who had looked at her with compassion outside that saloon, who had seen past her circumstances to the person she could be. "What are you thinking?" Nathan asked, catching her staring. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Rebecca said. "How lucky we are. Everything we have, everything we have built, it all started because you were kind to a stranger. You changed my life that day, Nathan. You saved it." Nathan reached across the table and took her hand. "And you changed mine. You gave me purpose, family, love. We saved each other, Rebecca." That is what we did. After dinner, they walked through the streets of Butte, and Rebecca led Nathan to the corner where the old saloon had stood. She stood there for a moment, remembering the desperate, frightened woman she had been, kneeling in the dust with her hand outstretched. "Sometimes I think about all the people who walked past me that day," she said quietly. "All the people who looked at me and saw something shameful or frightening or invisible. And then I think about you, stopping when no one else would, seeing me when no one else did. It is such a small thing in a way, stopping to help someone, but it changed everything." Nathan put his arm around her. "It is not a small thing. Kindness is never a small thing. It can change lives, change everything. I learned that from Tom Williams, and I hope I have passed it on. I hope our children will learn it too, that you help people when you can because it is the right thing to do." They stood there together as the sun set, and Rebecca thought about the strange, winding path her life had taken. If her father had not died, if she had not lost everything, if she had not been desperate enough to beg on the streets of Butte, if Nathan had not happened to walk out of that saloon at exactly that moment, if he had been like all the others who walked past. So many ifs, so many moments where things could have gone differently. But they had not. Their paths had crossed at exactly the right moment, and they had both been brave enough to take the hand extended, to trust, to hope. The years continued to roll by, marked by the changing seasons and the rhythms of ranch life. Thomas grew into a tall, serious young man who loved working with the cattle and horses as much as his father did. Sarah was more bookish, preferring to help her mother in the dress shop, showing an early talent for design and sewing. In 1895, Rebecca gave birth to another daughter, Grace, a surprise baby who arrived when Rebecca thought she was too old for more children. Grace was lively and mischievous, keeping everyone on their toes. The ranch continued to prosper, and so did the dress shop. Nathan and Rebecca were respected members of the community now, known for their hard work, fair dealing, and willingness to help others when they could. Nathan never forgot the lesson Tom Williams had taught him, and he made a point of giving chances to young men who were down on their luck, just as he had been. More than one cowboy found his feet working at the Lawson Ranch, learning skills and saving money to start their own lives. Rebecca, too, looked for opportunities to help, particularly women in difficult circumstances. When she saw a young woman struggling in town, she would offer work in the dress shop or recommend her to friends who needed help. She remembered too clearly what it was like to be desperate and alone, and she was determined to be the kind of person who helped rather than walked past. By 1900, the turn of the new century, the Wild West was fading into memory. Towns were becoming cities, the railroad connected Montana to the rest of the country, and the rough, lawless days were mostly gone. But the land itself remained largely unchanged, still wild and beautiful and harsh. The Lawson Ranch stood solid and successful, a testament to hard work and love. Thomas was 18 now and talking about starting his own ranch on land adjacent to his parents'. Sarah was 16 and working in the dress shop regularly, with an eye toward taking it over someday when Rebecca was ready to slow down. Grace was 5 and the joy of everyone's life, fearless and clever, and already showing signs of having inherited her father's way with animals. One summer evening, as the family gathered on the porch after supper, Rebecca looked at the people around her and felt her heart swell with gratitude. Nathan sat beside her, his hand clasped in hers as it had been for nearly 2 decades. Thomas was telling a story about a stubborn bull he had dealt with that day, making them all laugh. Sarah was sketching dress designs in her notebook, occasionally showing them to Rebecca for feedback. Grace was playing with a litter of barn kittens at their feet. This was everything she had dreamed of and more. A family who loved her, work that fulfilled her, a home that was truly hers, security and comfort and the respect of her community. It had not come easily. There had been hard years, crop failures, harsh winters, times when money was tight and the future uncertain. But they had weathered every storm together, Nathan and Rebecca, their partnership and love the foundation on which everything else was built. That night, after the children had gone to bed, Rebecca and Nathan took a walk under the stars as they often did. The sky was clear and vast, the Milky Way a river of light overhead. They walked hand in hand toward the creek that ran through their property, listening to the water burble over rocks and the night sounds of insects and distant cattle. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had not met?" Rebecca asked. "If you had walked past me that day like everyone else." Nathan was quiet for a moment, considering. "I try not to think about that," he admitted. "It is too terrible to imagine. You might not have survived, and I would have gone on just working, existing, but not really living. No wife, no children, no real purpose beyond the next day's work. I do not think I would have survived much longer," Rebecca said honestly. "I was at the end of my rope that day. Another week, maybe 2 at most, and I think I would have just given up and let go. You truly did save my life." Nathan stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "And you saved mine. Maybe not in such an immediate way, but you saved it all the same. You gave me reason to get up in the morning, to work hard, to build something meaningful. You gave me love and family and purpose. I was alone in the world before you, and I did not even realize how lonely I was until I met you." Rebecca rose up on her toes and kissed him. This man who had shown her kindness when she needed it most, who had loved her faithfully for all these years, who had helped her build a life beyond her wildest dreams. They stood there by the creek for a long time, holding each other under the stars, and Rebecca sent up a silent prayer of thanks for the strange twists of fate that had brought them together, for the tragedy that had driven her to Montana, for the desperation that had left her begging on the street, for Nathan's compassion that had made him stop when others walked past, for both of their courage in taking a chance on each other when they had every reason to be afraid. Life had been hard, but it had also been beautiful. And standing there in her husband's arms, with her children sleeping peacefully in the house they had built together on land they owned, with work she loved and a community she was part of, Rebecca knew that she had everything she had ever truly needed. The following years brought more changes, as years always do. Thomas married a sweet girl from a neighboring ranch and started his own small spread on land Nathan helped him purchase. Sarah surprised everyone by falling in love with a banker from Butte and moving to town, where she took over full ownership of the dress shop from Rebecca. Grace grew into a spirited young woman who preferred working alongside her father to any indoor pursuits, and who had a gift for training horses that surpassed even Nathan's. Nathan and Rebecca gradually handed over more of the ranch operations to Grace and the hired hands, though Nathan could never quite stop working entirely. He was in his mid-40s now, and the years of hard physical labor had taken their toll. He moved a bit slower, needed more rest, but he was still strong and vital and deeply engaged with the ranch. Rebecca focused more on the house and garden, on being a grandmother to Thomas's growing brood of children, on visiting Sarah in town, and admiring her success with the dress shop. She had accomplished everything she had set out to do in life and more. She had her own business, though Sarah ran it now. She had a family who loved her. She had financial security. She had respect in the community. And most importantly, she had Nathan, her partner and love for more than 2 decades. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a celebration at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from all over the region to honor them. There was food and music and dancing, and speech after speech praising Nathan's fairness as a rancher and employer, Rebecca's skill as a businesswoman and seamstress, and both of their generosity to the community. When it was Nathan's turn to speak, he stood with Rebecca beside him and looked out at the gathered crowd. "I am not much for speeches," he began, and several people chuckled because it was well known that Nathan was a man of few words. "But I want to say something today. 25 years ago, I married the most remarkable woman I have ever known. But our story actually started 3 years before that, on a street in Butte. I saw a woman who needed help, and I made a choice to stop, to extend my hand, to offer what assistance I could. It was not a hard choice. It just seemed like the human thing to do, but that one small act of kindness changed my entire life. It brought me Rebecca, and through her, it brought me everything else. Our children, this ranch, all of you. So I guess what I want to say is this: be kind. Help people when you can. You never know how one moment of compassion might change not just their life but yours as well." There was not a dry eye in the crowd by the time he finished, and Rebecca hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. These were tears of joy, of gratitude, of profound love for this good, kind man who had seen her at her lowest and chosen to help. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows as years do. Mr. Patterson died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72, and Mrs. Patterson followed him less than a year later, seeming to simply give up without her beloved husband by her side. Nathan and Rebecca grieved them deeply, for they had been more than employers or friends. They had been family. Rebecca's health remained good, though Nathan developed a persistent cough that worried her. The doctor in Butte said it was likely from years of breathing in dust and cold air, nothing serious but something to watch. Nathan dismissed her concerns, insisting he felt fine, but Rebecca noticed he tired more easily than he once had. In the fall of 1910, when Rebecca was 48 and Nathan 51, they decided to take a trip. Grace was perfectly capable of managing the ranch. Thomas was well established on his own land, and Sarah was thriving in town. For the first time in decades, they had no pressing responsibilities, and Nathan suggested they travel to Kansas to see where he had grown up, to visit the grave of his parents whom he had not seen in more than 30 years. It was a long journey by train, but a comfortable one, and Rebecca enjoyed seeing new places and landscapes. Kansas was flatter than Montana, the land stretching out endlessly under a vast sky. Nathan showed her the farm where he had grown up, now owned by strangers, and they visited the small cemetery where his parents were buried. They spent a week there, staying in a boarding house in town, and Rebecca got to hear stories about young Nathan from people who had known him as a boy. On the way back to Montana, as they sat in their train car watching the landscape roll by, Nathan took Rebecca's hand. "Thank you for coming with me," he said. "I needed to see it one more time to remember where I came from, but it made me realize that Montana is truly home now. That ranch with you, that is where I belong." "That is where we both belong," Rebecca agreed. "We built that life together. It is ours in a way nowhere else could be." They returned to the ranch to find that Grace had managed everything perfectly in their absence, and life settled back into its familiar rhythms. The seasons turned, the work continued, grandchildren were born and grew. Rebecca and Nathan aged gracefully together, their love deepening with each passing year. They had weathered so much together, hard times and good times, loss and joy, struggle and success. They had built something lasting, something meaningful. When Rebecca was 52, Nathan became seriously ill with pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter. For weeks, Rebecca nursed him, barely sleeping, doing everything she could to help him fight the infection. The whole family gathered, fearing the worst, but Nathan's natural strength and stubbornness pulled him through. He recovered slowly but surely, and by spring he was back on his feet, though he acknowledged he needed to slow down and let Grace handle more of the ranch work. That illness was a turning point. Nathan and Rebecca both realized how precious their time together was, how it would not last forever. They had always known it intellectually, but now they felt it in their bones. So they made a conscious effort to savor every day, to not take each other for granted, to say, "I love you," often and mean it deeply. They spent more time together, taking rides out to their favorite spots on the ranch, sitting on the porch in the evenings talking about everything and nothing, visiting their children and grandchildren regularly. Nathan taught Rebecca more about working with horses, and she proved to be an apt pupil even in her 50s. Rebecca taught Nathan to appreciate the finer details of her sewing work, and he surprised her by taking up woodworking, creating beautiful pieces of furniture for their home and gifts for their children. By the time they reached their 30th anniversary, they were both in their mid-50s, their hair gray, their faces lined, their bodies showing the wear of decades of hard work. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the young people they had been when they met. Nathan still saw the woman with auburn hair and frightened eyes who had been brave enough to take his hand. Rebecca still saw the cowboy with kind gray eyes who had stopped when everyone else walked past. Their anniversary celebration was quieter than the 25th had been. Just family this time, all gathered at the ranch house for a meal and an evening together. Thomas was there with his wife and 4 children. Sarah came from Butte with her husband and their 2 daughters. Grace was there with the young cowboy she was courting. a good man who worked on a nearby ranch and treated her with obvious adoration. As the evening wound down and the grandchildren were put to bed in various rooms throughout the house, the family gathered in the parlor. Thomas raised his glass in a toast. To my parents, who have shown us what love and partnership truly look like. You have built something remarkable here, not just this ranch but this family, this life. You have shown us how to work hard, how to be kind, how to help others, how to love faithfully. We are who we are because of you. Rebecca felt tears slide down her cheeks as they all drank to the toast. She looked around at her family, at the life she and Nathan had created, and felt such overwhelming gratitude that she could hardly breathe. She thought about the desperate woman she had been, kneeling in the dust outside a saloon, certain her life was over. She thought about the simple act of kindness that had changed everything. She thought about every choice they had made since that day, every challenge they had faced, every joy they had celebrated. Later, after everyone had gone to bed and the house was quiet, Nathan and Rebecca sat together on the porch one last time before retiring. The night was clear and cool, perfect spring weather, and the stars were brilliant overhead. 30 years, Nathan said softly. Seems impossible. It does, Rebecca agreed. But also it feels like we have always been together. I can barely remember what life was like before you. I do not want to remember what life was like before you. Those years seem gray and empty compared to everything that came after. They sat in companionable silence for a while, holding hands and listening to the night sounds around them. Finally, Nathan turned to Rebecca. I want you to know something, he said seriously. In case I do not always say it enough, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You and our children and this life we have built together. If I died tomorrow, I would die a happy man because I have had you to love and be loved by. You made my life complete, Rebecca. Do not talk about dying, Rebecca protested, but gently. We have many more years ahead of us. I hope so. But whether we have 5 more years or 25, I want you to know how grateful I am. For you, for everything. Rebecca leaned her head on his shoulder. I am grateful too. You gave me back my life when I thought it was over, and not just that day in Butte, but every day since. You have loved me, supported me, believed in me. You helped me achieve my dreams while we built dreams together. I could not have asked for a better partner, a better husband, a better life. They sat there until the night grew cold and they had to go inside. 2 people who had found each other at exactly the right moment and built something beautiful together. Their story was not one of grand gestures or dramatic moments, though it had started with both. Instead, it was a story of daily kindness, steady partnership, faithful love through 3 decades of ordinary days that added up to an extraordinary life. The years continued to be kind to them. Nathan's health stabilized after his bout with pneumonia, and though he was not as strong as he once had been, he remained active and engaged well into his 60s. Rebecca too stayed healthy, her mind sharp and her hands still skilled at sewing, though she mostly did it for pleasure now rather than business. Grace married her cowboy in a beautiful ceremony at the ranch, and they built a house on the property so they could continue to manage the ranch operations. Thomas expanded his own ranch and became one of the more successful cattlemen in the region. Sarah's dress shop thrived, and she took on 2 apprentices, young women who needed the work and the skills, passing on the tradition of helping others that her mother had established. The grandchildren grew, and eventually, great-grandchildren began to arrive. Nathan and Rebecca found themselves the patriarch and matriarch of a large, loving family, all of whom traced their blessings back to that day in 1882, when a cowboy stopped to help a desperate woman outside a saloon in Butte. On a warm summer day in 1920, The family gathered at the ranch to celebrate Nathan and Rebecca's 60th birthdays. They were both 78 now, remarkably spry for their age but definitely showing the weight of their years. They moved slowly, tired easily, but their minds were clear and their love for each other, and their family had not dimmed one bit. As the celebration wound down and the younger family members prepared to leave, Rebecca and Nathan sat together under the cottonwood trees near the house, watching the activity around them. Great-grandchildren played in the grass. Grandchildren helped clean up from the party. Their own children moved among everyone, organizing and managing, and Rebecca and Nathan could rest and simply enjoy being together. "We did all right, did we not?" Nathan said, watching the scene before them. "We did more than all right," Rebecca replied. "We did wonderfully." Nathan turned to look at her, his gray eyes still as kind as they had been on the day they met, though faded with age now. "I would do it all again, you know. Every bit of it. The hard times and the good times. I would make the same choices, take the same path, because it led me here to this moment with you." "I would too," Rebecca said, taking his weathered hand in her equally weathered one. "I would go through all of it again to end up here with you." They sat there holding hands as the sun set. Two people who had saved each other, who had built a life together from nothing but hope and hard work and love. Their story had started with a moment of kindness on a dusty street in Montana, and it had grown into something beautiful and lasting, a legacy that would continue through their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren for generations to come. As the stars began to emerge overhead, the same vast Montana sky they had watched together for nearly 4 decades, Rebecca thought about the woman she had been, desperate and starving, begging outside that saloon. That woman had been broken, but she had also been brave. Brave enough to accept help when it was offered, brave enough to trust a stranger, brave enough to hope that life could be better. And life had been better, so much better than she ever could have imagined. Nathan had given her a second chance at life that day, but she had given him something too. She had given him purpose, family, love. They had saved each other, and then they had built something remarkable together. As the years went by, Nathan and Rebecca remained as close as ever, spending their final years in contentment surrounded by family. They passed peacefully within months of each other in 1925, both in their 80s, having lived full, rich lives. Nathan went first, slipping away in his sleep one autumn night, and Rebecca followed the next spring, as if she had simply decided she had waited long enough to be with him again. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking their ranch, under the vast Montana sky they had both loved. Their gravestone was simple, bearing their names and dates, but more importantly, it bore the words Nathan had spoken all those years ago at their anniversary. One moment of kindness changed everything, and it had. That single moment when Nathan Lawson stopped to help Rebecca Lawson outside a saloon in Butte, Montana in 1882 had rippled outward, affecting not just their two lives but the lives of everyone who came after them. Their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren all carried forward the lessons they had taught. Work hard, be kind, help others when you can, love faithfully. The ranch they built continued to operate for generations, a testament to what could be achieved through partnership and perseverance. The dress shop Sarah inherited thrived for decades before eventually being passed to her daughter. The family they created remained close, gathering regularly at the ranch to remember Nathan and Rebecca and honor their legacy. And sometimes, when the family gathered on summer evenings to watch the sunset from that same porch where Nathan and Rebecca had spent so many hours together, the older members would tell the younger ones the story about a desperate woman begging outside a saloon, about a cowboy who stopped when others walked past, about a simple act of kindness that had changed everything, about love that had endured for more than 40 years and created a legacy that would endure forever. The story became part of the family's history, passed down through generations, a reminder that a single moment of compassion could change not just one life but many. It became a call to be the kind of person who stops, who helps, who extends a hand to someone in need. Because you never knew how that one small act might ripple outward, creating waves of goodness that would extend far beyond anything you could imagine. In the end, that was the true legacy of Nathan and Rebecca Lawson. Not the ranch they built, or the business they established, or even the family they raised, though all of those things mattered. Their true legacy was the lesson they taught, that kindness matters, that every person has value, that helping someone when they are down is always the right choice. That love can flourish in the most unlikely circumstances, that two people working together can overcome any obstacle, that a life built on compassion and hard work and faithful partnership is a life well lived. And so the story of the cowboy and the woman begging outside the saloon lived on, not just as a tale from the past, but as a living example of what was possible when people chose kindness over indifference, hope over despair, love over fear. It was a story that began with an ending and transformed into a beautiful beginning, a testament to the power of a single moment to change everything.